planting. You got guys that couldn't put in corn get a second chance on beans if it dries out.
Yeah, right. And how much of that crop is going to make it, how much is not, what are the Chinese actually going to be buying? But people forget the Chinese they're not foolish. I'm talking about it as a trading entity, because even when the beans were trading $12, $13, $14 and the Chinese were buying a lot of them, at certain times they would announce that, oh, we canceled 3 shipments, and the beans would fall off dramatically only to come back. So it's like they go, oh, we know how to play this game. We're not going to let everybody just front run us. It's like Warren Buffett when he does his takeovers or when he buys big blocks of stocks. You find out about it well after the fact. Nobody's going to telegraph everything to you. And the Chinese play that game very, very well. So I'm being because the market's telling you to be very patient here. Very, very patient. But that corn, that gets interesting. And I don't know whether it's what they're afraid of here. The ethanol mandates changed, so they're using more corn this year. I think it's up to 15%. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but it did change by statute. So maybe they're more worried about the corn crop because this corn rally has sustained itself, and it even sustained itself not completely yet. But that's why, again, that 240-minute chart I find so interesting at this juncture. And we're getting right up there. I mean, look at the high. It was exactly that high at 45 and a quarter. So,
yeah, you looking at the SEPs or the Julys?
I'm in the SEPs. July is deliverable, so you can't. I mean, unless you've got a place to store them where you want to pay for storage and run the certificates, but you better, if you're going to play that game, corn better be going much, much higher.
Yeah, and I was in, Wisconsin driving around in the in the sticks just to look at the corn crop was just planted. It's miniature.
Yeah, I know. I've done the same thing when I was out in Galena. I drove back very slow going through Freeport in that area just to hit the back roads. I like to do that.
I mean, they don't even have onions out of the ground up there yet, Ira. And they said that was another week or two off. I mean, onions are the first things that come up.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But in my garden, it was always marijuana. Oh, no, wait, hold on. I mean, onions. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's and Caterpillar's starting to rally. And it's some of the energy names, and a lot of the names that surround the premium. It's Devon, LNG, Phillips, right. Caterpillars had a pretty good low. Google just went down and tried to fill a gap and missed doing it by 20 cents, so they can jam a lot of shorts down here.
Oh yeah, and again, if you're looking for a stock picker's market, which supposedly all the experts are. You better pick accordingly, and that's why the ag stocks interested me, because on a PE basis they're so cheap because they've been doing nothing for so long, I don't hear anybody talk about them yet. Some Caterpillar stuff, but they gear that more to China than they do to anything in the ag sector, and I certainly can't disagree with that.
And Cat breaks out over 136.40.
How about Bunge? What do you think about Bunge, Ira?
I love Bunge because it's a play. It's a South American play, but the market doesn't like it. So it's I've been long for a little bit. It bothered me that it can't get any more traction because it's been on everybody's list of buyout potential, because don't forget, some BHP had wanted to buy it, and Potash, all these stocks were a lot higher, but which is why it's such a great mirror on the ag sector, because as soon as the ag sector falls out of favor, these stocks, nobody is interested in acquiring, and I'm talking about as full buyouts. Kind of surprised that the private equity guys haven't made some plays towards, because some of these firms are just, it questions, I think Archer Daniels is a great, has a great name and is in a great niche, but it has been badly managed for so many years, probably 20 years. They brought in a woman who I was really thought was going to turn it around, but the company's done nothing.
It actually looks like it wants to go too.
Yeah, it's like gold was for a long time. It fools you, and it just it looks good, and then boom, nothing. So it takes a lot of patience, and I don't know if the market were really correct, whether it could totally slough that off. But to me, I'm watching them. It's worth watching, and that's where I sit with those. But again, I think the charts are getting very interesting.
So I was just over in the UK. This is Pete. I was just over in the UK for the last 2.5 weeks, hanging out with my cousins and other people, and a lot of them are business owners and whatever. And some of them are very liberal, and some of them are more conservative. And I know there's a lot of antipathy towards Europe. There's also people who are mad about Brexit, but everybody's sick of the whole thing. That's one thing. They're just so freaking sick of it. They would ask me, they were afraid too. They're afraid, but they also think that they're going to be able to sort it out, even if they get stuck with a hard Brexit. So, what do you think? I
think that's absolutely right, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because a bigger part of that, I don't know, everybody should be following what's going on between Switzerland and Brussels right now, because they're trying to squeeze the Swiss, because they want to make an example of the Swiss. And it all comes down to which laws you're going to follow. That's why Brexit was for Britain, because the European Court of Justice, which many people would argue is neither a court nor judicious, they just do the political will of the Eurocrats, and they're so intrusive in the rules that they pass. It was a big part of the problem. Of course, the media doesn't talk about that, because that may actually teach you something, and that's not a good headline. Oh, the European Court of Justice, it's not a good headline. So, but the Swiss are not happy, because they're really being squeezed. And last week, Brussels said that European stock exchanges were not going to be able to trade Swiss stocks because of different regulations. And not really anything really happened. The Swiss stocks, Nestle's, big companies, people still traded them other places. You find a way if you have to, but they're trying to squeeze them on the energy. Ambrose Evans-Pritchard has a piece today, and don't think for a minute it doesn't tie into Brexit. It was always a problem, because Switzerland has a special relationship with Europe, and there's 127 signed agreements to make it all possible. But now the EU is trying to squeeze and wants to redo some of those agreements, because of the way it sets a precedent for what the Brits could ask for. And I didn't understand why the Brits never even brought that up. But now it's out there, and it's something to pay attention to, because the Swiss aren't without their ammunition too. A lot of goods move on Swiss roads, through Swiss tunnels, through the Alps to get to Austria and places east. So the Swiss aren't without their own response here. But I would advise finding that Ambrose Evans-Pritchard piece from that. I think he wrote it yesterday. Somebody sent it to me. Let me see if I got it. It's a very interesting piece. Got it. I'm going to send it to Judd. Do what you want with it. The title, it was written on July 2nd, EU sharpens torture tools the Swiss showdown escalates into energy war. Very, very important. Let's see. Because this tells you the mindsets of, going back to Brexit. Europe fears Boris Johnson.
You got a link
Make
that doesn't
no mistake.
need a subscription for that?
I don't think it does. It's because I think if you read it on the day, you do.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so it's, but these are serious issues because the Brits, look at, again, President Obama made a huge mistake when he intervened in British politics and told them they'd go to the back of the queue, for those who don't remember. And it was a huge mistake. And that was intervention into British domestic politics. That's why the media is so full of crap, because they pick and choose whatever they want to phrase something. But that was before the referendum when he said that back. Well, if you choose,
that was about
Brexit,
a month or two before. Yeah.
Right. And and now Trump, and now they blast Trump. Well, you're getting involved.
Obama might have pushed enough people. He might have pushed people over on that. He might have swung that vote.
Well, yeah, except that he would never admit that. It was going that way anyway. I tried to save it. Everybody's got to, whatever poison you want to pick. But I think that the Brits have to wake up to this and go, hey, we have ways. It's not like the British Empire. The Brits were pretty good at putting that together, and that's whether you like it or not, whether you respect it or not. But they did put it together, and there's still a relationship between, the British Commonwealth. So they have trade power. They're also, the Germans have gotten nervous about a hard Brexit because Germany runs a massive trade surplus with the UK, and the supply. You want to talk about supply lines? The British, whatever exists in the British auto industry, which is, Land Rover, Jaguar, which is owned by BMW, that's a massive production plant, as the Japanese who've gotten involved in the discussion because Honda and Nissan and Toyota built large plants in Britain because they liked the rule of law in Britain, and they wanted to have entry into the EU. So now they're nervous that, if this flies apart, they're going to lose their
subjective opinion on my side, but I just met a lot of Brits. Like, I literally had a chat with like 50 different people over 2.5 weeks in different venues who wanted to talk about this. And I think they're, on balance, they're pretty tough competitors. They're well educated, a lot of really smart, hardworking people. It's not what I would have said about Brits. I thought an old stereotype. I think they work really hard.
Well, listen, and Oxford and Cambridge are still the best two universities in Europe. Okay, if not the two best, they're certainly in the top 5. So there's a lot of really good research that comes out of there, especially Cambridge, in data analytics and things like that. They're much more further along than the European universities. And the Germans are not happy about this. Again, they don't want a hard Brexit. And that's why Merkel even softened, but Macron keeps pushing because he's trying to harm Germany. And the Germans are really waking up to how much he's trying to harm. This guy is like Charles de Gaulle to the bottom of his being. And de Gaulle was all about, limiting the strength of Germany and elevating France, and everything going on in the financial world now in trying to steal the business out of London is whether Paris or Frankfurt is going to be the financial center of Europe. And it's a real battle. Judd, I told you on that Wolfgang Munchau piece, it's really everything we talked about because it's all about, he writes very openly about Lagarde pushing for a Euro bond. So
I think this morning for everybody.
Yeah, I resent it to you this morning. definitely worth a look at.
It's in there.
So, I mean, these things are real, and the battles are real, and the battles are going on, and they continue going on. And again, how they got this done, and there's no doubt that the Italians bid hard in accepting Lagarde, but Lagarde is announced, and all of a sudden Brussels is no longer okay. The Italians are doing fine, so we're not going to put that surcharge on them for violating the fiscal rules. Come on, who are you kidding? And then I know we're going to get to this, and we may as well get to it now, is the Greek elections. If everything is so good, as you read, Greece, look at Greek bonds and stuff. Everything is so good, then why did the Greeks vote to change government? And the vote wasn't even close. I think with the way the Greek voting system, the last I read, is they actually have the New Democrats have an absolute majority. So that's a very powerful position. And if things are so good, why do they continue to defy the established parties or the established sitting government and bring in new forces? If you can, I just need an honest answer to that.
There was, I'm interested in that a lot too, Ira. We were at a Greek fest this week in our neighborhood. The Greek church had a Greek fest. My wife is half Greek, so we went to it. And having a conversation with a Greek immigrant, a recent Greek immigrant who has come over since the financial crisis, I think had to do with the last regime having changed their opinion and having the old bait and switch. We're not. Oh yeah. And so I think that's what it had to do with. It was even the far right parties. I forget what the name of it. I forget what the name of the far right party was.
It's the golden.
Yes.
Golden. Right, but they didn't make it. Yeah, Golden Dawn. I don't think they got 3%, so I don't think they're going to get their seats.
Nothing. But the Communist Party took 10 seats. So I don't know. It's an interesting mix of everything, but I'm wondering how much of it had to do with actual politics and what's truly going on economically, and how much had to do with emotions because of the betrayal that they felt. Well,
it's a very good question, but that's why I like to read Yanis Varoufakis, who was actually the finance minister in the Syriza government, but he broke with Cyprus over bowing and bending to Europe, because they ran the referendum, and the referendum after they got was opposed to fiscal austerity and everything that went with it, and Cyprus did it anyway, and that's I think what really angered Varoufakis, and he became very outspoken. So he had to go because Greece wasn't going to receive those funds if they didn't bow to the will of Brussels. Now, make no mistake about this, what they've asked the Greek people to endure, and listen, you could be like a Tea Party person in the U.S., and you got to look at it through that lens and say, and the initial idea of the Tea Party, when Santelli, spewed forth the idea in that one rant, but it came from others, is that, hey, you borrowed all that money, you lent all that money, you'll suffer the pain and let the market clear itself and let's be done with it. Well, that's,
never happened.
And well, never, and I'm not going to disagree with it, because again, I thought QE1 was necessary to prevent a mass liquidation of the system. The Tea Party moralists, as I'll call them, and that's not I'm not making a qualitative judgment whatsoever. That's a very objective judgment. Believed in the liquidation of assets. Hey, you're overextended, liquidate. I got cash, I'll buy. And that's really, and so it's the issue of, should the central bank be involved in a moral hazard situation? Well, we know the answer to that. So in Greece, it was, things similar, but the moral hazard implications were for German and French banks. And that's just a fact, because they were on the hook for $270, $280 billion in Greece, substantial money. So the bailout allowed them to get out. All you do is have to look at Greek stocks. And Peter Bookvar has been very good with this. He's been looking at Greece for quite a while. And I hate to say it, but I will, but even Wilbur Ross, he rolled out of his Irish banks and started buying Greek banks when the proverbial crap really hit the fan. So there was opportunities there in that regard, and these guys took advantage of them. But there's so much at play here. But don't think for a minute they bailed out Greece, and that's where Lagarde, and she caught a lot of heat from a lot of members of the IMF for getting involved in this. And really, the IMF should never have been involved in Greece, because if Greece is part of the EU and the EU is a developed economy, what is the IMF doing getting involved? There was plenty of assets in the EU itself to bail out Greece, but that's where the great lie gets revealed. The emperor was truly naked with that, and Lagarde still has to wear that. That was a terrible situation. The Germans forced her to it, and then she tried to turn on the Germans by pushing for, by trying to get the IMF out of the deal and leaving everybody else with the bailout. But they were having none of it. So that's all the politics of this whole situation. And yet you still see the Greek people, because why? And there's an article today in the FT by this guy, Ben Hall. As I read it, I said, he must be on the payroll of Brussels. He's not a journalist, because the article is preposterous with the things that he cites. But Greece still has 18% unemployment. You think about that. You think about if there was 18% unemployment in the United States. Now, it's of course harder to measure, and the pension issues, but Tsipras, who got knocked out, he got beat badly in the European elections in May, and then he decides to call an early election earlier than he had to, and got trounced. So what world are these people living in? They're in true la la land. They are so detached from the reality on the ground. And the Greek people have had enough, because what was foisted upon the Greek people was, again, what economists call an internal devaluation, in which labor gets squeezed in order to get the fiscal fiscal situation under control. So Greece has squeezed itself so much that it's been running what they call a primary surplus of 3.5%. So they've been running a surplus of 3.5%. The government has, and that's everything except the interest on the debt. So I'm not sure what that net number is, but that's what a primary surplus. So that's always the IMF advice to a country that's in a debt situation, in a debt crisis. You got to, really tighten up. The Greeks have paid a terrible price. You could say, well, they deserved it. Well, listen, did they deserve it any more than the idiots who lent them the money so willingly? Just like subprime brokers. You know what? You lent the money. You knew what you wanted, a little more return. It's no different than people lending the French government at negative 10 basis points. So eventually you're going to pay a price. When that eventuality comes, I don't know. But eventually you will pay a price. And who should bear the brunt of it? Who should come in and support it? It's a very big question. But again, it still dodges the question of, if things are so good and going so well, as the bond markets in Greece reflect, then why was the Tsipras government tossed out, and overwhelmingly tossed out? I've yet to see anybody speak to that, but it'll come. But that's what my eye is upon. And again, look at European debts this morning. I don't know. The Bund's probably at negative 38, 39. The French is probably back at negative 9 or so. It's, you know, and it's all because of central bank intervention. You know, I know global savings got slow down in Europe. I don't care how slow things are in Europe. If there was no central bank intervention disrupting the market signaling mechanisms, do you think that France would be able to borrow money at negative 10 basis points? The answer is we hold these truths to be self-evident. They are self-evident.
Yeah, I was just looking at ADM while you were talking, and trying to put in an ORH today. So it bears watching. It needs to close above 41.94, and it went up there and printed it, but didn't get high enough. It's got to sustain above that to go.
Yeah, and it's so. I mean, that's where Europe is this morning. There's no getting around it. There's a lot more questions than there is answers. And there were some articles that I read in different places over the weekend about the Germans really starting to get unhappy about the way the media has portrayed Merkel being so badly beaten up by Macron and the French getting their way here. So again, this is one of those, be careful what you wish for.
All right.
So the market seemed to like the Greek election, Ira. Was that the news today or not?
Well, they wanted to like it, but except that, when I saw this morning, I don't know if I don't have the Greek bank stocks up, but I know people who trade them, and they were actually down today. They've had a pretty good run. So it may, they may be a buy the rumor, sell the fact kind of thing. And he's still, what's his name, who now has to put the government together and, different people in lines and see how Brussels accepts them and what they're going to put forth. But it'll be interesting here to watch the Italians too. The Italians are no dummies, because this kind of opens up a whole new potential avenue of disruption. And it helps, actually, it'll help Britain in some way, because the more disruption there is to the status quo, the more beneficial it is for England, or the UK, I'm sorry.
One of my cousins who's a, very righteous left-wing, moral imperative of his views and the moral imperative of Europe and stuff. And I was talking to him, and I said, it's not just Brexit's a crisis for the European Union. Italy's going to start throwing big monkey wrenches. They're only going to go along with what is in their interest, and if it's not, they're going to say screw off. That's where they're getting to.
Yeah. And what did he have to say?
He got quiet on that. It's like he hadn't even thought of it. And then we were just talking about Switzerland. That's another one.
Yeah, and how about when it comes to bailing out the European Central Bank? What's the cost going to be? If I'm a UK citizen, I'm getting out of there as fast as I can, because the bill is going to be enormous. And if they present me with a bill for leaving, I'd say, good, send your fleet in and come and collect. Let's play
Boris Johnson's doing a Trump on that. He's saying we're going to take all that money that we're not going to pay it to Brussels. We're going to spend it on infrastructure development in the UK for economic stimulus. That's what he's saying. And that's probably
I know. Yeah, and as John Kerry would say, so if Boris Johnson says, send your ships in to collect, like they used to do in the 1800s, that's what John Kerry, that's so 1800s. Yeah, meanwhile, the Russians grabbed Crimea. It may have been the 1800s, but they're still in control of Crimea. So what are you going to send in, a cyber attack on Crimea? No, that doesn't work. When people know how to, I hate countering nonsense with more nonsense, but they put you in that situation. But the Brits, if I ran Britain right now, I would be putting together. It's like that Hinkley Point, which is a huge nuclear project.
It's gone to huge
Britain.
cost overruns. Crazy.
Yeah, but I would fund it all in euros because the Europeans need European corporate bonds, and this is as much a French, probably more, because EDF, the huge French nuclear company, they're the ones behind us. Let them fund it with euro debt. I can issue bonds. EDF can issue bonds at zero. Here, Alex. So fund it with euros. The Brits are making some categorical mistakes.
That's a great idea, and I'm going to tie it back to something else we talked about with you not too long ago. I think it was with you, where that if Germany needs to start its own euro or leave, there's going to be basically two euro-denominated debt, and if it's Southern debt, it's going to crash. If it's German debt, it's going to go through the roof. So try to play this financing on that angle too, if you can.
Yeah, and we've had today it's I actually had a few of these on, but I got out of them a little early. But you know what? They compressed the German-French bonds into 26 basis points last week. The low, I think, over the last 6 years or so has been 15 basis points. But really, it's only the ECB who could buy that. I mean, you're still getting -10, but if I'm getting negative interest rates, would I rather own German debt or French debt? And in the Munchau article, they talk about influencing German to get rid of their legislative mandate to run budget surpluses. Germans passed about 5 years ago, where they had to get their budget in order because everybody wants them to start, fiscal stimulus on a major scale. But there is the law. So they think that they're going to be able to get the Germans to overturn that law. That's in the Munchau piece. Well, I say good luck to you. Good luck to you. I just don't see it as an easy thing to do. And the Germans, see, that's the problem with all this, is that they think the world is static. Everything these people talk about, everything they write about, it's like people aren't reacting. Well, they are reacting. How much did the Greeks react in their election? How much of the Germans are? You know what? You see, and the next set of German elections, I'm not sure when they are, will be even more important, because what you're seeing is that people within those nations, and it flies in the face of the narrative. Again, the emphasis on narrative of what they're trying to tell is that, now you were in England, visiting your cousins, and everybody sucks up a narrative. Well, you know what? I have never existed in this business by accepting the narrative of others. Now, if my own research and analysis, and when I look at charts, if it fits that, fine. Then I think there's some truth to it. But everybody is spinning a narrative, and that's what Trump really disrupted, was the established narrative. Call it, put it what you. But that's the genius. That's the genius of Steve Bannon.
Oh.
Steve Bannon understands the power of narrative in the political discussion. That's his strength. That's what he understands.
Ira, that brings me something that I wanted to I've been muted for a minute, just talking to the people in my room about the trades, but that I wanted to circle back to with Greece. So what doesn't lie they do, manipulated numbers do lie, but what doesn't lie is unemployment being at 18% in Greece, full employment here. Okay. I don't even know what the stock market's down in Greece, 70-80% from the highs of 08, 09. While the story is that, and they're continually spinning that, with the stock market being so strong here. Okay, so numbers don't lie. Trump looks very safe, and then you've got Mitsotakis. I forget how to say his name, but
right.
85 is Greece now. Is Greece starting to look like a long-term long, while the U.S. to me is starting to look like a long-term short?
Well, That's a very good discussion. The guys who I do, some work with and sit with, who manage a fund and are totally global macro discretionary. They started their fund last year. I've been working with them though for 6, 7 years already because they were blog readers, and I was a really good fit for them. And they're good. They're very patient, and we were discussing that this morning. And my point to them was, look at the emerging markets. The peso, again, we're going to test that 200-week moving average, which will be very interesting. It's been able to hold it back. But if I put up that weekly peso chart, Judd, you got that up? Hello?
I got the cash right there. Yeah, 188.
Okay, put up the futures, because I got the futures on the bar. Yeah, put up a weekly.
Okay.
And run the 200-week moving average through that, and you can see how nicely.
All right, so I'm looking at a weekly continuation. So that comes in at, which chart you're looking at? You're looking at a comma daily or a daily continuation?
I'm looking at a weekly continuation. I know what the daily is. I got the weekly, and the way it picks it up for me, it goes back to 2013 without scrolling back. So I got a pretty good picture here with the 200-week. So the 200-week comes in on the futures and at 5.3044.
Okay, well, for whatever reason, mine doesn't come in. Well, yeah, okay, I got it.
Okay, you see what I'm looking at?
Yep, got it.
This has legitimacy because it's held it, if we go back to, you can see, but the 200-day, which I'm going to put up now, I'm going to leave this, I'm going to go to 200-day. Now it's held above here for it had one dip down, which is during the tariff discussion. But I'm watching this closely. So and Morgan Stanley put out a piece, I guess, over the weekend from one of the top analysts talking about that they think there's going to be a stock market correction, that the emerging markets are going to underperform. But when I look at emerging market assets, I look at this, I look at the ruble, and even Argentina got a positive article in the FT over the weekend. So people are looking, they're forced to look, because you know what? Would I rather buy Mexican 8% bonds than French 10-year bonds yielding? I can get 8% overnight money in Mexico, and the inflation rate has been holding pretty steady. But I must have read 5 articles this weekend that talked about how supply chains, a lot of companies were moving to Mexico. It's happening.
Well, look at the breakout of the EWW today. I mean, it just broke above its moving average cross at the 250. I mean, it looks
right.
good.
So even people who don't know anything are starting to see that, hey, Mexico is in play. Now, my question still remains why AMLO didn't go to the G20. Why did he stay away? But there are definitely things, and people are seeing it. Besides some firms moving to Vietnam, there is a lot of talk about Mexico. Talk I haven't heard in quite a while. So, number one, that's why KSU is important, because everything that gets shipped back and forth outside of trucks is trains. You're not talking water traffic for the most part. That's train right through the heartland. So automobile parts, it's a reason to keep a very good eye on that. And I'm telling you, if Buffett's not buying it, he, with all that cash he's sitting on, even if he's not buying it, he should be influencing it, and especially if the supply chains are truly moving into Mexico, which right now it's just talk. But it was interesting to see how many, even the South China Morning Post had the issue about the supply lines and the supply chains moving, and very interesting. There are definitely things afoot, and because their perspective was, why China should be a little bit nervous here, and why they may suffer if the supply chains really start to move. So just things to be attentive to. But Morgan Stanley was not, they were negative on emerging markets. So the people who sent it to me, and I had read it besides that, I said, yeah, I'm not in agreement with these guys at this point. I got time to wait and see. But again, going back to, let's return to that Britain versus the whole Brexit thing. If I was a Brit, I would be borrowing so much money in euros right now. If I was British corporations, I'd be floating euro-based bonds because you can sell them. You can sell them to the ECB because they're hungry. They're looking for things to buy.
That's an awesome line. Thanks.
What else we got?
I was just looking at the ruble, and it's kind of got an inside day going back and forth here. The real's trying to make up its mind what that wants to do.
Yeah, and that's a country fraught with political problems, because they just go back and forth. But yet the currency is actually, I'm glad you brought that up, is holding up pretty well. But their inflation is well under control, and they have a high, when you think about negative real yields everywhere else, the emerging markets have positive real yields, and not small. Now you may say, well, they need them because they have to attract all this money, and they think, a lot of people that say, well, the world's going to a slowdown. The world may be going into a slowdown, but then U.S. debt, which has been my argument, is going to explode too, because we have a budget deficit, a national budget deficit of over $1 trillion, and that's with quote unquote 3% growth. What does it look like at 1.5% growth, at 1% if this slowdown starts? So that's when these curves should really steepen, because why do I want to own long-term U.S. debt? I'm chasing yield for the sake of chasing yield, which is, again, that concept of this solar fool theory. I'm only doing it because, well, as long as these bonds rally, I'll be able to sell it out for a capital gain and be done with it.
Hey, Ira, what do you think about oil right now?
I have no opinion on the oil market.
All right.
I've got my big view as far as Russia and Saudi Arabia and the influence that they have. But you know what? We can go back down to 50. We can go back up to 64. I don't know. I really don't have a major view. I just don't. I see that I'm more interested in the natural gas because I still like the concept of LNG. So that's more important to me. I'll just, let that sit out there. And that's a market to me that has to develop. It's been locked into these certain ranges and very subject to headlines. And then you see it retrace when the headlines give way. So I'll leave that for smarter people at this juncture. I mean, I love trading it, but I just don't see anything there. I'd rather focus, if I'm in the commodity sector, to provide an opportunity, I would certainly be there, but I'm more interested in what the grains do here. So that's where I sit. So, and Judd, I would keep watching that 240 minute chart on that corn, because I think that sets up really well.
Okay, and that comes, yeah. All right, I just pulled it up again so everybody can take one more look at it. So it's really above 445 and a quarter. If it starts getting above that on a closing basis, it can go. Yeah,
and nobody's expecting it. Why should it? It's all the grain you want. And it's not like it's really underperformed. And again, I think the grain stocks ran up actually after we talked, with China, but now they're kind of settling in here and trying to make a decision. They're down, and the Bunge's back to unchanged now. And all that's doing, as we've talked about, is screwing with the 200-day moving average. Let's see. Yeah, it's teasing everybody who wants to be long. Let's see.
What did I just do with an ADM? And it ADM above 41.95 close. You just want to go with it.
Yeah, this one is, also, but again, so much, it's like with the gold stocks, so much bad management, and that's where you suffer. So that's why people wind up buying, like, what is that, DBA or Moo, because they think, but then I'm buying a bunch of lousy management. So, well, I'm kind of trapped there. But things that I'm watching, these are these really, really, really get interesting. And we saw, with the Italian bonds, what they get up to, and the futures. I go back to there because we were really all over that. Got up to 140, and then all the good news that you were going to get out of there.
Well, I was in shock when I walked away, and I came back and saw what the high was. It went another 100 and some points.
Yeah, because of and everybody was short. There were massive shorts, and there's an article I think in the FT today talking about how it's retraced the entire election. I think it's done more than that. Let's see though if that's right. When they fell out of bed, they were 300 low. Let's go back to that.
Yeah, well, it went back to the 2018 May high.
Yep.
Actually went.
That's exactly where we went to.
It went to the reversal low. It spiked the reversal low from November 2017.
Yeah, and so much of it has to do that, and the question still begs to be: what was the political trade-offs that went to the appointments that took place last week? What was the political payoff for Lagarde? What was the political payoff for Ursula von der Leyen? And everybody else, what's his name, Charles Michel. And what was there's always a political, it's Europe. Nothing happens. It's like dealing in the city of Chicago. You know what? Everything has a very open quid pro quo. What am I getting what am I getting for selling my soul?
Right, and Lagarde is one of the best political actors there is.
Oh yeah. She's very, very, very good. You'd be a fool to sell her short, but that doesn't mean that the outcomes are things that the markets are going to like.
Well, that tells me her appointment was an unusually political appointment.
Yeah, and again, it hasn't been confirmed yet. So let's see what happens. And the Germans are not happy. They're not happy. I know people like your cousins do. When I read the FT, most of the time I read the letters now, and actually I respond to some and I get engaged in some of this conversation because I can't stand reading these Euro files. And some guy the other day accused me. He said, "Are you a bot?" Because I said that the winner from all this is Putin. He said, and his answer was, "Putin? Yeah, hardly. He came out the worst in this." Well, anybody who could say that to me. So I asked him, "Well, no, I'm not." Oh, he asked me if I was a troll. I said, "No, I'm not a troll." That was his response. "But are you a pimp from Macron?" Conversation kind.
Oh boy.
Trolls anybody they disagree with.
Exactly. But one of the greatest lines ever on CNBC ever was when Jerry Brown was the Attorney General for California. This is one of the great lines, and you can go Google it. He was suing State Street and a couple of other firms over currency trades that he thought that the state, paid way too much in commission and prices. So he, as Attorney General, filed suit with State Street and somebody else. And so Michelle Caruso Cabrera, who's a Kudlow alkalite, and I'm being kind, she's at the conference. It's in California. And she comes up to him and she asks him a question. And Jerry Brown, basically saying, well, it's the market. And so Jerry Brown looks at her and says, "What are you, pimping for him?" It's like one of the great lines, and you can go watch it. "What are you, pimping for him?" I love the guy for saying that. He just totally, he should have asked that, because her question was inane, basically. Well, it's the market, right? That's why there's all these fines leveled against the banks for manipulating prices and harming their customers, because it's the market. And his response is just beautiful. But that's what I say. That Macron is a Gaullist. That's what he is. He has this highly inflated sense of France's position in the world, and it's highly inflated.
Hasn't that always been the case with France, dating back to before World War II?
Yeah.
Well, dating back before Napoleon even.
And that ass Le Maire, who's the finance minister of France, he was out speaking this weekend, as was what's his name? Couret. They're all positioning themselves to be IMF director now that Lagarde is gone, and they talk about how it's important to have, again, that's a European position. And my stance is, why are the people who run the IMF? Why should they be Europeans? Why are we still living in the colonial world that existed, when Bretton Woods, because the world was still colonial. In fact, the French fought in Algeria to sustain colonialism. The Brits fought in Suez to sustain colonialism, although they got smart and realized it was over. The United States stepped into the vacuum that French colonialism left in Vietnam. So the world is a far different place. Who says that it has to be a European to run the IMF? I got two better people right off the top of my head. Trevor Manuel, who was the finance minister of South Africa during its transition, who's a brilliant guy. I had the pleasure of having lunch with him when the CME was getting ready to launch the South African Rand. Him and Maria Ramos, who's now a real power, they've gotten married, so it was kind of interesting. But they were brilliant to sit and talk to. This guy could run the IMF in a minute, as could Raj Raham, who's the professor at the University of Chicago, who was the head of the Reserve Bank of India. These are highly qualified people. Why do you need a European? That's a remnant of a colonial past. And it's amazing how the Europeans are colonialists when it fits them. Because every day the French get up and go, how can we undermine the United States? That's what de Gaulle did every day of his existence. So listen, it's why Nixon had to go off the gold standard, because it was the French who were demanding exchanging dollars for gold. And there were way too many dollars out there to gold. And Nixon said, no, this can't work. But it was the French who really blew it up. And they did it to undermine the U.S. The whole concept of the European Union is to act as a counterbalance to the U.S. The euro is to replace the dollar as a reserve currency. But in order to do it, they need the Bundesbank mindset. And you know what? That's way too much for them. They just cannot get themselves to adapt it. But that's the situation we're rely on. And I know. I'll read all the Euro files, but whenever I want to really engage in a discussion, they don't want it. It's like being in England when you ask your cousin that question. They don't want to engage.
I got a bunch of cousins, and just one of them had that view. And when I questioned his thing about, I told him about Italy and others are gonna they're gonna just start wrecking it if it's not in their interest. And he got real quiet. Yeah. And then I don't know, that was interesting. But other guys were listening, and some guys were saying, "God, thank God you said that."
Yeah, no, it's very serious. It's with this, and that's the problem. What Draghi has done with the ECB is, again, this balance sheet. Yeah, I go back to the question. I personally asked Jerome Powell on June 27th when I was I was just at a symposium where he was speaking in Chicago, and there was a Q&A period, and I asked him, in his sense, who guarantees the ECB? And without batting an eyelash, he said, well, they have a printing press. which he wasn't Fed chair yet. He was just a governor. But I did find that response interesting. And I asked the same question to Carmen Reinhardt about maybe a year later, 6 months later. No, it was 6 months later. I know exactly when it was. It was the first game of the World Series, which I bypassed so I could go see her, and then I went to see Joan Baez. What a night for me. But I did ask. I asked her that question, and she gave a totally different answer than Jerome Powell, which makes her more fit for the Fed anyway. But I've always believed that. These are interesting questions, and these are interesting times, and not to be easily glossed over. That's my point. How you trade this stuff on a day-to-day basis is one thing. How you see it going and where it's going over a longer-term period is far more important. And again, I think the Brits are making a big mistake by not loading up on doing borrowing in euros and selling them to the ECB and let them choke on them.
So Boris can short the euro by selling them debt. All right.
He can, yeah. Go ahead. You're looking for bonds. We're looking to raise funds cheap. Here you go. Have some more. If I was a British firm, I'd be doing all my borrowing in euros, and essentially because the euro, the pound is, I haven't looked at that chart in a while. I love trading that cross, but it's just been a headline-driven phenomenon, and it's had a huge, it's had a substantial move since May, of course, when Theresa May gets thrown to the side because they can't figure out how to exit this. But a strong euro against a pound, we're at where we're at 89.60 on the cross. That doesn't hurt Britain, by the way. And all these people who are looking for an absolute calamity in the UK, well, unemployment is at record low. They've been able to sustain themselves there. I'm not saying there may not be a price to pay at some point, but it hasn't been as severe as those think. And Europe is really scared that if there was a hard Brexit and England didn't fall apart, well, then it calls into question the entire EU project. So if you don't think that's enough of an incentive to try to destroy the UK, that's plenty of incentive. And look who's pushing the hardest against them, the French. The Germans are a little leery here because they got a lot at stake and they do a lot of business, and their supply chains run through the UK as well as a massive trade surplus. So they're not nearly as hard-edged as the French are. A lot of things in motion. The markets are far too quiet. Again, I stress this, for all the things that are on the burner. And I know it's the summer, but I'm always interested when things start to unravel in the summertime.
Yeah, well, I think that the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty busy.
Yeah, we shall see. I'll be back more this week because, again, I'm not writing it all, so I'm on the. I'm looking for places to bounce ideas. There are some really good comments, not on the most recent blog, but the one before that. There's some guys, Dave Richards, who's actually from Singapore or Hong Kong, and a couple other guys really engage in some very knowledgeable discussions, which are very worthwhile. But
yeah,
that's where we reside.
Just for that, when you go to Notes from the Underground, you can elect to get all the feedback. All you have to do is click on it.
And you should, because I'm telling you, a lot of it, I'm very impressed by it. And I try to stay out of some of it because it's so good. I don't even want to cloud it up. Let it roll. But if there's any questions, Judd, anybody wants to discuss anything in particular, just let me know, because I am going to just be kind of laying low this week. Not as far as my work, but just my focus on trading per se.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Well, thanks for coming in.
All right. Okay.
Thanks, Ira.
All right. Take care, guys.